Hello everyone, welcome to the class of Quantitative Methods of Management. Let's start the class of Unit 1.2 where we'll discuss collection of data. So guys, you remember, right, in the last class we have discussed about what is statistics is all about. So now in this present class, I'll talk about how the data is collected, either through primary data or through secondary data. Imagine that you are launching a new restaurant and you need to gather insight about the customer preference. How would you differentiate between the data you collect directly from the customers and the information available from the existing source? Next thing comes in your mind, what methods would you use to ensure that the data, what you collected, what you gathered is accurate and relevant for making informed business decision? So the objective of this topic is to discuss the concept of data collection, gain insight into the importance of collecting accurate and reliable data as it is a foundation for statistical research and analysis. Point 2. Differentiate between primary and secondary data. Here we'll discuss the distinction between data collected first and for the specific research purpose, which we call as a primary data, and the data which is already being collected for the other purpose, which we call as secondary data. Point 3. Understand the methods of data collection. Here we'll explore various methods like survey, interviews, observations and experiment, and we'll understand how to select the appropriate method based on the research goals, resources and the study type.
Okay, now introduction to data collection. Talking about data collection, okay, what is data collection? Data collection is a critical process in research involving the gathering, measuring, and analyzing of accurate data. Okay, where this process is essential to answer research questions, test hypotheses, and evaluate outcomes. Okay, so effective data collection ensures that the information used in the research is both reliable and valid, directly influencing the quality of the study conclusion. So, data can be collected mainly in two forms. Either it can be based on primary data or either it is based on secondary data. Now, talking about the types of data collection. So, when we are talking about the types of data collection, already I mentioned that the two ways we collect the data, either it is a primary way of collecting data. So, primary way of collecting data is collected directly from the source for the specific research study. Okay, it includes surveys, interviews, experiments, observations. Okay, it can be time consuming and costly together. Now, talking about secondary data collection mechanism, here, when we talk about secondary data collection mechanism, the data collected for other purposes is repurchased for the current study. Secondary data, when we are working on secondary data, it is a mechanism through which we are actually trying to employ those data which is already being present in the public and non-public domain. If the data which is already being collected, if we are again using the same data for our research purpose, that is what the secondary data is all about. Okay, so you can have a data maybe from government report databases, okay, or historical records, books, articles, any mechanism we can use them. Okay, so when we're talking about secondary data, it may or may not aligned because this data we are using from the sources which is already available. So it may not be directly or indirectly aligned with the research objective of our study. But even then we are using because for some reasons, instead of working on primary data, we feel that working on secondary data make more sense as for this study. The methods of the collecting of primary data, the methods what we can work on for collect the primary data, there can be few methods. Okay, first one is observation method. Okay, so when we talk about observation method involves collecting data by directly observing behavior or phenomena in their natural environment, allowing researchers to gather real-time authentic data about actions, events, and interaction. This method is particularly valuable for studying behavior that cannot be easily captured through surveys and experiments. Okay, so talking about the types, the types what you involve, there can be various types of observation method. It include participant observation. Okay, participant observation, it can be non-participant observation, So basically, participant observation is where the researcher actively participate in the environment or event being studied to gain deeper insight. And non-participant observation is where the researcher remains detached and only observes the behavior or event. It can be structured observation, which follows a predefined framework, allowing the researcher to focus on specific behavior or events. It can be unstructured observation, which is more flexible, enabling the discovery of unexpected insights. The process of observation include defining the objectives of the study, selecting the appropriate setting or environment, developing an observation guide to ensure relevant data is recorded, and collecting data through systematic observations, and finally uh, analyzing the data to draw conclusions or insight. So this method provides valuable information about natural behaviors or real world events, making it essential for many types of research. Working on the process of observation includes defining the objective of the study, selecting the appropriate setting or environment. Okay, it includes developing an observation guide to ensure relevant data is recorded. It works on collecting data through systematic observations, and finally analyzing the data to draw conclusions or insight. Okay, these methods provide valuable information about natural behavior and real world events, which make it essential for many types of research. So the advantages of working on data collection, it can be real time data collection, contextual insight. It is suitable for quantitative and qualitative analysis. Talking about the disadvantages, so it can be based on observation bias. Okay, so like where the researcher is subjective opinion or expectations may influence the data collection process. It is also time consuming, as the observing behavior or events in real time requires significant efforts and resources. Lastly, there is a limited control over variables, as the researcher cannot manipulate or control the environment, making it difficult to isolate specific factors affecting the behavior or phenomena being observed. Now, discussing the observation method, an example of the observation method in practice is observing consumer behavior in supermarket, where the researcher may watch how shopper interact with product, make purchasing decision, or respond to store promotion. This can provide valuable insights into customer preferences and buying pattern. Next, talking about the interview method. An interview is a direct conversation between the researcher and the respondent, typically used as a qualitative research technique to gather detailed information. It involves face to face interaction, allowing the observation for the researcher to explore the participant response in depth. So the types what it involves, it can be structured interview, which follows a fixed set of questions, ensuring consistency across various participants and making it easier to compare responses, though they may limit the depth of the conversation. It includes unstructured interview, on the other hand, which are more flexible and open-ended with no predefined set of questions, enabling the researcher to explore topics more freely and naturally. It can we have semi-structured interviews, which combine both approaches with a set of core questions, but allowing the researcher to delve deeper into responses as conversation progresses. Interviews can be also conducted in different format, like personal interview or telephonic interview, depending upon the research context and participant availability. So interview method, it includes defining research objective, developing interview guide. It includes selecting the participants, conducting interviews, and analyzing the response. So the process of conducting an interview involves several key steps. First, the research objective must be clearly defined, outlining what the researcher hopes to learn from the interview. Next, an interview guide is developed, which include a list of questions or topics to steer the conversation. After that, the participants are selected based on the research criteria. Once the interviews are conducted, the responses are carefully analyzed to identify themes, pattern, or insight that align with the study goals. Talking about the advantages, okay, the advantages can be one of the key strength is that it provide in-depth insight and detailed data analysis, which allow researchers to explore participant thought, feeling, and experience on a deeper level. It can interviews are also offer flexibility to explore topics further as the researcher can ask follow-up questions based on participant responses. Additionally, interviews help to build a rapport between the interviewers and participant, which can encourage openness and more honest, detailed responses. However, there are some disadvantages to this method. Interview can be time consuming and resource intensive, requires significant efforts in terms of preparation, scheduling, and data collection, where the researcher personal opinion or reaction may influence the direction of the conversation or interpretation of the responses. Furthermore, because interviews often involve small sample sizes, the finding may have limited acceptability, making it difficult to apply the result on a larger population. An example of using interview in practice is conducting interview with business leaders on digital transformation. These interviews could provide valuable insight into how companies are adapting to new technologies and challenges they face during this process, helping researchers to gain a deep understanding of industry trends. Now, going further, we'll talk about the another method, which is a questionnaire or survey method. So, a questionnaire is a quantitative research tool designed to collect data from large number of responded through structured question. It is an efficient way to gather standardized information, allowing researcher to analyze patterns and trend across wide sample. The types what it includes can be close-ended questions. These questions are to basically provide predefined response options such as yes or no or multiple choice, which make it easier to quantify and analyze responded. It can be open-ended questions which allows responded to an answer in their own words, providing more detailed and qualitative insights, though they may be harder to analyze systematically. Going further, so the process of using questionnaires include several key steps. First, the research objective must be clearly defined, outlining what information need to be collected. Then the questionnaires is designed carefully. Crafting questions should be clear, relevant, and unbiased. And afterward, the questionnaire should undergo a pilot test with the small sample to identify any issues with the questions or format. Once refined, the questionnaire is distributed to participants and then their responses are then analyzed to identify pattern, trends or insights related to research objective. So the questionnaires method offer several advantages. It is cost effective and efficient for gathering data from large samples as it allows researchers to collect responses from many people in relatively small or short time of period. The standardization of questions ensures that all responded answers the same set of questions, make it easier to compare and analyze the data. Additionally, anonymity provided in questionnaires may encourage honest responses as participants feel more comfortable sharing their views without the fear of judgment. However, there are certain disadvantages. One of the key limitation is that questionnaires often provide limited depth of responses, especially with close-ended questions which restrict participant ability to elaborate on their thoughts. Another drawback is the potential for low response rates as people may ignore or refuse to fill the questionnaires leading to incomplete or biased data. Okay, so additionally, there is a risk of misinterpretation of questions by respondent, which can skew the result if the participant do not fully understand what is being asked. Now, discussing further, an example of using questionnaires in practice is conducting interview with business leaders on digital transformation. Although this example mentions interviews, questionnaires could be useful alternates to gather insight on how businesses are navigating digital transformation, particularly when a large number of respondents need to be surveyed efficiently. Fourth one is experimentation study. So when we talk about experimentation, it is a systematic approach to research that involves manipulating variables to determine cause and effect relationship. It allows researchers to test hypotheses in control setting and observe how changes in one variable affect other. So basically, there are two main types of experiment. It can be laboratory experiment or field experiment. So laboratory experiments are conducted in controlled environment where the researchers can manipulate variables while conducting or controlling the other factors. It ensures that the results are due to the manipulated variables rather than external influences. Field experiments are conducted in natural setting with real world conditions, although less controlled than laboratory experiment. Field experiment provide insight into how variables interact in more realistic environment. So experimentation method includes defining hypotheses, selecting variables independent and dependent, designing experiment controlled and treatment groups, collecting data and analyzing result. The process of conducting an interview involves several steps. First, hypothesis must be defined, which states the expected relationship between the variables. Next, the variables are selected. It can be independent or dependent. Independent variables are which the researchers manipulates. Dependent variables which is observed for changes. The experiment is then designed, often including control and treatment group, to compare the effects of manipulated variables. Afterward, data is collected typically through observations or measurement. Finally, the results are analyzed to determine if hypothesis is supported or if data reveals any significant patterns. Experimentation have certain advantages. One key benefit is that it allows for control over variables, okay, which enables the research to isolate the effect of a specific independent variable on a dependent variable. Okay, the level of control make it possible to establish casual relationship, okay, identifying on how one factors indirectly influences the other factor. Additionally, experimentation often replicable, meaning that other researchers can repeat the experiment under similar conditions to validate or challenge the finding. However, there are some disadvantages to experimentation. One concern is that it lacks ecological validity, particularly in laboratory setting, where the control environment may not accurately reflect real world conditions. Additional issues is the ethical consideration involving in manipulating variables, especially if the manipulation could harm participants or violate ethical guidelines. Finally, the experiment can be intensive, requiring significant time, money, and effort to design, implement, and analyze data. Okay, an example for experimentation in practice is found in psychology and behavioral science. Researchers often use experiment to study human behavior, such as how changes in environment or stimuli affect emotions, cognition, or decision making. These experiments help to establish a deeper understanding of psychological processes or human behavior. Now, discussing next is the focus group method. It involves defining research objective, selecting participants 6 to 12 individuals with common features, developing discussion guide where key topics and questions need to be discussed, conducting focus group sessions through moderated mechanism, and analyzing the transcript and notes. So focus group offers several advantages. One key benefit is that it provides rich qualitative data from diverse range of perspectives, allowing researchers to gather detailed insight that might not emerge in individual interviews. The group setting can also facilitate interaction and idea generation, which encourage participants to build on each other thought, which which can lead to new insight and creative solutions. Additionally, the focus group can reveal group dynamics and social norms, shedding light on how participants influence each other and how collective attitudes within the specific population. However, there are some disadvantages. One concern is the dominant voices in the group may overshadow others, leading to unbalanced discussion where some participant views are not fully expressed. Additionally, groupthink can occur where participants conform to the majority opinion, potentially suppressing individual responses or critical thinking. Another challenge is that the data analysis from focus groups can be complex and time consuming. It involves interpreting qualitative data and identifying key themes from detailed transcript. Focus groups are widely used in market research and product development, where understanding consumer preferences, need, and reaction can guide the design of new product or services. Now, talking about secondary data collection method, it can be published sources. So, utilizing existing reports and databases is an efficient method for gathering relevant data for research. Okay, it involves different types. Okay, it can be academic resources or journals. It contain peer-reviewed articles offering empirical research and theoretical insight, making them vital for academic work. Books provide comprehensive studies on specific topics, offering in-depth exploration in historical perspective. Government reports present official statistics, policy analysis, and other data critical for social, economic, or policy research. Industry publication gives insights into trends, market analysis, and sector specific information, which is valuable for business economic research. Talking about published sources, so the process of using these sources involves clearly defining research objectives to focus the search on relevant data. Researchers then identify relevant sources based on their topics and scope to conduct a literature review to assess existing knowledge and extract and organize data for analysis. Finally, the data is analyzed and synthesized to draw meaningful conclusions and integrate new insights into research framework. This approach ensures a well-rounded, efficient, and informed research process. So the advantages of using the existing research report and databases, it can it is a cost effective and time consuming, as researcher can access pre-existing data without needing to conduct primary data collection. Okay, this approach is also help in providing access to wide range of established data, helping researchers to build on previous work and gain valuable context for their studies. Additionally, it provides context and background for research, allowing for a deeper understanding of the topic and supporting the development of a solid research framework. However, there are some disadvantages or to relying on secondary data. One limitation is that the data may be outdated or not directly applicable to the current study, reducing its relevance. Researchers also have a limited control over the data quality and reliability, as they are dependent on original source methods and standards. Moreover, there is a potential bias based on the source which can influence the interpretation of the data. Secondary data are used in literature review, in academic research, where it helps in summarizing existing findings, identifying gap in knowledge, and inform new hypothesis or research question. So basically, secondary data, when we talk about secondary data, they are used in literature review, in academic research, where it help in summarizing existing findings, identifying gaps in knowledge, and inform new hypothesis or research question. This approach allow researcher to gain comprehensive understanding of the field and avoid duplicating previous work. When we talk about online database and websites, they provide a wealth of pre-existing data collected by various organizations and researchers and institutions, make them essential for their secondary research. These platforms allows researcher to access valuable information without the need for primary data collection, which save both time and resources. Okay, when we talk about academic database, it include JSTOR, PubMed, Google Scholar, which offers access to peer-reviewed journals. research paper and scientific publications, government websites like data.gov, World Bank, OECD provides official data sets, economic indicators, and public policy reports often focused on social and economic topics. Industry reports from sources such as Statista, IBIS World, and Nelson offer market analysis, trends, and consumer behavior data, which are particularly useful for business and market research. Additionally, market research platforms such as Pew Research Center and Gartner provide valuable insight into social trends, technological development, and sector specific research. These online database and website enable researchers to gather comprehensive, reliable, and up to date data supporting informed decision making and ensure a well rounded research outcomes. Talking about the advantages of online database and websites, using online database and website for secondary data collection offers several advantages. Like accessibility is a major benefit as data can be easily accessed from anywhere with the internet connection. It is also cost effective to the expenses of the primary data collection. Additionally, it is time saving because it eliminates the need for data collection and reduces the time spent on processing, allowing researcher to focus on analysis. However, there are some disadvantages on relying on secondary data. One concern is the quality control, where the quality of data can vary significantly across sources, requiring researchers to critically evaluate its credibility and reliability. The relevance of the data can also be an issue as the pre-existing data set may not align perfectly with the specific research questions or the context of the study. Furthermore, when we work on online database and websites, we need to understand that basically these mechanisms are commonly used in literature reviews, providing background information and supplementing data for various research projects, helping to inform the directions of new studies and offering valuable context for further analysis. So, challenges in data collection can hinder the reliability and effectiveness of research, as inaccurate data may result from poor survey design, leading to misinterpretation or error in responses, or from interviewer bias, where the researcher own opinion influence the data gathered. Non-response is another common issue as incomplete data from non-respondent can skew the result and reduces representativeness of the sample. Additionally, the data collection can be both time consuming and expensive, especially if the large sample or complex methods are involved. This make it as a resource intensive process. Lastly, there are significant ethical issues, particularly regarding the privacy and confidentiality of the participants. So the researcher must ensure that the sensitive information is protected and the consent is obtained to maintain trust and comply with the ethical standards. So addressing these challenges is essential to ensure the quality and integrity of the data collected.
Now, talking about summary slide. In conclusion, when we talk about data collection, it is crucial component of accurate statistical analysis. It works with the formation of reliable research outcomes. It works where the choices of methods which we work on, it depends on the research objective, available resources, and the nature of the study. So guys, whether you are using primary or you are working on a secondary data, or you are employing methods like surveys, interviews, or observation, it is essential to select the most suitable approach for the specific research context. Here we worked on how we can ensure systematic and accurate data collection is key to success of any research project, as it is directly impact the quality and the finding and their validity. So when we do proper planning and we work on every detail attentions and we adhere to the ethical standard which is vital for obtaining the meaningful and trustworthy result, then only our appropriate mechanism works well. So guys, I hope you have understood the discussion on data collection in this class. So it was pleasure discussing these concepts with all of you. So it's time to wind up this session. Thank you everyone. Happy learning.